Celeste's life had become a daily battle for survival on the streets, begging for food and shelter, until one fateful day when she stumbled upon a luxurious suitcase abandoned by a wealthy man named Tiago. Instead of succumbing to temptation, Celeste's honesty led her to return the suitcase to its owner, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would forever change both of their lives. Tiago, who was terminally ill, saw something in Celeste that moved him deeply, and in his desperation, he made her an unusual proposal that left her speechless. As the days passed, their bond grew, and Celeste found herself not only helping to care for Tiago, but also becoming a beacon of hope in his darkest hours. But as Tiago's health declined, so did the trust of his family, leading to a tense showdown over his wealth and Celeste's intentions. Yet through it all, Celeste remained steadfast, guided by her kindness and integrity, proving that even in the most difficult moments, compassion and love can triumph over greed and suspicion. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Celeste, weary from days of struggle, stood on the most crowded street corner in the city, her hand reaching out with a silent plea for mercy. Her eyes, filled with quiet desperation, searched the faces of passers-by, hoping for a glimmer of kindness. "Please, anything will help. I just need something to eat," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the noise of the bustling city. Yet, one by one, people hurried past, absorbed in their own lives, their gazes fixed on their phones or lost in the labyrinth of their thoughts, unaware of the suffering right before them. The weight of her existence pressed down on her shoulders like an unbearable burden, a constant reminder that she had become invisible in a world that no longer noticed her. Despite the gnawing hunger in her stomach, Celeste couldn't bring herself to resent those who walked past without a second glance. She understood that people had their struggles, their distractions, and perhaps their pain. But understanding didn't fill her stomach, and compassion didn't warm her in the cold nights that seemed to stretch endlessly. Just as she was about to give up hope for the day and find a place to sleep, something unusual caught her eye. Near a trash can, half hidden in the shadows, was a sleek, luxurious leather suitcase. Her heart raced as she cautiously approached it, glancing around nervously for anyone who might claim it. The street was empty. The suitcase seemed abandoned. Curiosity and desperation battled within her, but hunger won. With trembling hands, she opened the case, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside were neat stacks of money, more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was a small fortune, enough to change her life forever, enough to banish the hunger and the cold. "This has to be a test," she whispered to herself, her mind swirling with the gravity of the decision before her. The bundles of cash seemed to weigh more than their worth, pulling her into a spiral of fear, temptation, and guilt. The hunger gnawed at her insides, urging her to keep the money, to take this opportunity and finally escape the suffocating grip of poverty. But something deep inside her, something unshakable, told her that she couldn't do it. She knew what was right, even if it meant continuing her struggle. She resolved to find the rightful owner, no matter the cost to herself. Just as she began to walk away, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the silence. A man in his mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, appeared, his face twisted with anxiety. "Have you seen a suitcase around here?" he asked frantically, scanning the area until his eyes landed on Celeste, standing beside the very object of his desperation. His expression shifted from relief to suspicion in an instant as he approached her. Celeste swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "Is this yours?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly as she gestured to the suitcase at her feet. The urge to be honest overwhelmed her. "I found it left here. I didn't know who it belonged to, but I knew I had to return it," she explained, extending the suitcase toward him with trembling hands. The man, who introduced himself as Tiago, quickly unzipped the suitcase and checked its contents, letting out a long, relieved sigh when he saw everything was still there. "Yes, it's mine. I was here for an important transaction, and I must have left it behind in my rush," he said, his eyes lingering on Celeste, taking in her tattered clothes and weary expression. There was something more than gratitude in his gaze. There was curiosity, perhaps even admiration. You could have easily taken this and disappeared. Why didn't you? Celeste's reply was simple, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of hardship and moral conviction. Because it wasn't mine, she said quietly. Keeping it wouldn't have brought me peace. It wouldn't have made me truly happy, knowing it belonged to someone else. Her words struck Tiago deeply, and at that moment, the walls around his heart began to crumble. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the profound truth in her selfless act, and for the first time in a long while, he was left utterly speechless. Tiago's gaze lingered on Celeste with an intensity she wasn't used to, as if he could see something within her that even she didn't recognize. People like you are a rarity in this world. Celeste, what is your name? He asked, his voice carrying both curiosity and admiration, a glimmer of an idea already forming in his mind. I'm Celeste, she replied softly, still in awe that someone so polished and important seemed genuinely interested in her. It was an odd feeling, being seen, really seen, when for so long she had felt invisible. Tiago hesitated for a moment, weighing his next words carefully. Celeste, I have a proposal for you. It's unconventional, but I hope you'll hear me out. His voice trembled slightly, not from nerves but from the gravity of what he was about to ask. Celeste, though puzzled, nodded, her curiosity piqued. I am dying, Tiago began, his words heavy with truth. I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and my time is running out. I've spent my entire life accumulating wealth, more than anyone could ever need. But now, standing at the end of it all, I realize that money can't buy the one thing I'm truly desperate for: human connection. Someone who values me for more than my fortune. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle between them. Your honesty moved me in a way I never expected. I want to ask you something extraordinary. Would you consider marrying me? Not for the money, but because I believe you are the kind of person who will use my inheritance for good, to help those in need. I need someone who will do the right thing when I'm gone. What do you think? His question hung in the air, so unexpected and profound that it left Celeste momentarily speechless. A storm of emotions swirled within her, colliding and crashing against one another. The very idea of marriage, especially to a man she barely knew, seemed surreal. The thought of taking his money felt wrong. She looked at him, her mind racing before she finally found her voice. I can't marry you for your money, Tiago. That's not who I am. But I can help you. I can care for you during this time. I just can't accept marrying for an inheritance. It doesn't feel right. Tiago's expression softened, touched by her sincerity. His eyes, which had seen more of the world than most, now looked at her with both surprise and admiration. If not for the money, then what would you want in return? He asked, genuinely curious. Celeste paused, her gaze thoughtful as she considered his question. Finally, she spoke with quiet conviction. I don't need wealth, Tiago. What would truly make me happy is if you used your resources to help others. People like me who are struggling to eat, to survive. If you could do that, I would feel that something good came out of all this. Her words struck Tiago deeply, more than she could have ever imagined. The tears that had been welling up in his eyes began to spill over, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. Finally, he let out a small, choked sob, followed by a weary yet genuine smile that seemed to brighten his tired features. Celeste, you are remarkable, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Most people would have seen only the money, but you see so much more. You have integrity, something I thought was long lost in this world. He paused, collecting himself before continuing. I will honor your request. I will make sure those in need are helped. But I must tell you, this is not just about money or inheritance for me. I'm looking for someone to be with me in these final days, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who sees me, truly sees me, for who I am and not what I possess. You've been the only person who didn't care about the wealth. You cared about doing what was right, and that means everything to me. Celeste, moved by his vulnerability, felt her initial resistance begin to waver. His sincerity touched something deep within her, a part of her that still believed in the goodness of people despite all the hardship she had endured. She realized that perhaps, in this strange and unexpected situation, there was an opportunity to bring some light into both their lives. Maybe I was too quick to judge, Tiago. If your intentions are true, then I'll consider your proposal. But I need to know more about you, about your illness, about who you are beneath all this wealth. Tiago nodded, his heart lifting with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. I understand, he said softly. I'll tell you everything. And with that, they began to walk side by side through the city streets, Tiago opening up about his past, the triumphs and the regrets, the empire he had built, and the illness that had forced him to reevaluate everything. As they walked, an unlikely connection began to form between them, one built on honesty, compassion, and the shared understanding that life is about so much more than what money can buy. I was diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago, Tiago began, his voice trembling slightly, as though each word was laden with the weight of his journey. Since then, my life has been reduced to hospital rooms and endless treatments. Celeste listened intently, her heart tightening as she absorbed the sorrow in his voice. There was a deep, aching sadness in his words that stirred something inside her. The doctors haven't found a compatible donor yet, and honestly, it's not likely they ever will. They've given me a month at best. His voice cracked the finality of his prognosis hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Celeste felt her heart break for this man who, despite all his wealth, was facing something no amount of money could change. Her throat tightened with emotion as she wished desperately that there was some way to undo his fate. Without a bone marrow transplant, there's nothing more they can do for me, he added, his voice faltering, as if the reality of his situation was almost too much to bear. The gravity of Tiago's words settled heavily on Celeste's chest, a weight that made it hard to breathe. His situation wasn't just a tragedy. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be. She realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just about a change in her life. This was about possibly making a difference in someone else's life, perhaps even saving it. As she reflected on all that Tiago had shared, a profound sense of responsibility began to grow within her. I don't know much about medicine or illnesses, she admitted softly, her voice filled with sincerity. But I do know how to care for people. If you're willing to accept my help, I promise I'll do everything I can to support you through this. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of her compassion and resolve. Tiago reached out and took her hand, a gesture filled with gratitude and relief. That's more than I could ever ask for, he replied, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Together, they walked toward Tiago's waiting car, where a chauffeur held the door open for them. As they drove through the city, Celeste listened to Tiago's stories, his words painting pictures of a life so far removed from her own that it seemed almost unreal. Yet, even as her mind tried to process everything, her body reminded her of the hunger she had carried with her all day, an ache that gnawed at her insides. When they finally arrived at Tiago's mansion, the car glided through towering iron gates and up a long driveway. The sight that greeted Celeste left her breathless. The mansion loomed before her like something out of a dream, its white walls glowing under the soft lights that lined the path. Tall, majestic columns framed the entrance, making the place look like a palace, a world so utterly foreign to the one she had known on the streets. Tiago noticed her awe and hesitation and offered her a gentle smile. I know this may feel overwhelming, but I want you to know that this is your home now, too, he said warmly as he guided her inside. The interior was no less spectacular than the exterior. The opulent chandeliers glittered overhead, casting a soft glow on the marble floors, while the luxurious carpets beneath her feet muffled her hesitant steps. Every detail, from the carefully selected artwork to the elegant furnishings, spoke of a life lived in comfort and style, a life Celeste had never even dared to imagine for herself. As they entered, a housekeeper approached with a kind smile, clearly already briefed on Celeste's arrival. We've prepared a bath for you, she said, her tone warm and welcoming. Celeste, still feeling out of place amid such luxury, nodded quietly and followed the housekeeper. She was led to a bathroom that could easily rival a spa. The air was filled with the scent of lavender, and the towels, fluffy and white, seemed to promise warmth and comfort. The bathtub, large enough to submerge herself completely, beckoned invitingly. As she slipped into the warm water, the tension of the day began to melt away, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Celeste felt some of the weight lift from her weary shoulders. After the bath, she was shown to the dining room, where dinner awaited. The table was set with understated elegance, the dishes carefully arranged, releasing tantalizing aromas that made her stomach growl audibly. Embarrassed by the noise, she hesitated before sitting down, but Tiago encouraged her with a nod. "Please make yourself comfortable. I hope you find the meal to your liking," he said, gesturing toward the array of dishes that had been prepared for her. Celeste took her first bites almost mechanically, driven by the hunger that had haunted her all day. But as her hunger began to fade, she started to truly savor the food, each bite revealing flavors she had never experienced before. "This is incredible," she murmured, her voice filled with awe as she tasted food that was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Tiago smiled, pleased by her reaction. "Sometimes, it's the simple pleasures that can be the most memorable," he remarked, his tone carrying a wisdom that came from years of life experience. A wisdom that hinted at what he hoped Celeste would come to learn in her new life. As they ate, Tiago continued to ask Celeste about her life, genuinely interested in hearing her story. For the first time in a long while, Celeste felt like someone truly cared, like her words mattered. She was no longer just a face in the crowd, a person to be ignored. Tiago's attention made her feel seen, and that feeling of being listened to, of being valued, was perhaps the most nourishing of all. After dinner, as Celeste adjusted to the splendor of the mansion, she couldn't shake the growing weight pressing down on her chest. Despite the luxury surrounding her, the harsh reality of her situation began to sink in. Tiago, though outwardly strong, was visibly deteriorating. His once confident stride had become more cautious, and the color in his face faded a little more with each passing day. Celeste, with a fierce sense of loyalty, devoted herself entirely to his care. She learned to administer his medications, closely monitoring his every movement, searching for the subtle signs of pain he tried so hard to conceal. One morning, after a particularly grueling night, Celeste helped Tiago sit up in bed, his fragile body trembling beneath her gentle hands. His determination, even in the face of overwhelming odds, comforted her, but the nagging seed of doubt had already taken root in her mind. As night fell, she found herself reflecting on the complexities of the situation she had been thrust into. Tiago's promise of loyalty offered some solace, yet the uncertainty of her future loomed over her like a dark shadow, casting doubt on everything she had come to believe. The challenges they faced together had suddenly grown far more complicated, and Celeste knew that the coming days would be crucial in determining the course of both their lives. The next day, she found herself pacing in Tiago's study, her fingers trailing over the scattered documents on his desk. Doubts swirled in her mind like a storm, each word on the papers echoing with questions she couldn't quite answer. A printed email caught her eye, its contents hinting at a sinister premeditation she refused to fully believe. But the kindness in Celeste's heart kept her from abandoning Tiago, especially now, when he needed her most. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Celeste decided to confront the situation head-on. She needed answers and believed the best way to find them was by speaking directly to those closest to Tiago. Starting with his medical team and the household staff, she began to ask questions. "Have you noticed anything unusual in the past few days? Anyone entering Tiago's office or handling his papers?" she inquired, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. But to her frustration, everyone denied seeing anything out of the ordinary. No one unusual had entered the mansion, except for Tiago's mother. The thought of confronting her directly stirred an uneasy feeling in Celeste. Pandora, as formidable as she was, could easily create conflict, something Tiago didn't need right now. So, for the time being, Celeste chose to keep her suspicions to herself, quietly observing from the sidelines. She didn't want to believe that Pandora would do anything to jeopardize her son's health, let alone withhold the bone marrow donation he so desperately needed. But that very afternoon, her worst fears seemed to materialize. The situation escalated when Tiago suffered a severe relapse. Celeste had been in the garden, attempting to clear her mind, when she heard frantic cries for help. Sprinting inside, she found Tiago collapsed, his face pale and lifeless, while the medical team scrambled to stabilize him. The sight of him in such a fragile state made the reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. The window for a bone marrow donation was closing rapidly, and time was running out. At the hospital, Tiago lay unconscious, hooked up to a maze of machines that hummed softly in the background. Celeste sat beside him, holding his hand, her mind still grappling with the implications of the email she had found. Doubts about Pandora's involvement lingered, but as she looked at Tiago's peaceful face, she made a decision. No matter what that document says, I know who you are, Tiago, and I'm here for you, she whispered, her voice filled with resolve. More determined than ever, Celeste prepared for the bone marrow donation the following morning under the guidance of Dr. Luis. The next day arrived with a mixture of anxiety and determination. As Celeste was led into the sterile, brightly lit operating room, her heart raced, but her resolve remained unwavering. This was her battlefield, the place where she would fight for Tiago's life, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The medical team moved efficiently around her, preparing for the procedure with practiced precision. Dr. Luis approached her, his reassuring smile offering a moment of comfort. "Are you ready?" he asked, gently squeezing her hand. Celeste took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "I'll do everything I can to help Tiago." As the anesthesia began to take effect, her thoughts lingered on him. His smile, his strength, the quiet moments they had shared. And then, everything went dark. The procedure began as planned, with Dr. Luis and his team working methodically. But midway through, an unexpected complication arose. The steady beeping of the monitors suddenly shifted, the sounds becoming more frantic. "Her blood pressure is dropping," one of the nurses announced, her calm tone contrasting sharply with the urgency of the situation. Dr. Luis's focus sharpened, his hands moving quickly as he instructed the team to adjust the equipment and administer medication to stabilize Celeste's condition. The room buzzed with activity, the tension palpable as they fought to regain control of the situation. For Celeste, the battlefield had become more than just a fight for Tiago's life. It was now a fight for her own. The connection they had built, the love and trust that had grown between them, was being tested most profoundly. As the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize her, Celeste's strength, courage, and unwavering determination to save the man who had come to mean so much to her became the driving force that would carry her through. "Stay with me, Celeste," Dr. Luis urged, his voice filled with both determination and concern. His eyes never left her, watching closely for any response, any sign that she was pulling through. The medical team worked swiftly, trying to stabilize the young woman who had risked everything to help a friend in desperate need. The gravity of Celeste's decision weighed heavily on the room. Dr. Luis had warned her about the risks, but seeing her now, lying vulnerable on the operating table, made it all too real. This wasn't just a battle for Tiago's life anymore. It was a fight for Celeste's, too. And Dr. Luis was committed to doing everything within his power to ensure that both of them survived this ordeal. Hours later, as Celeste slowly emerged from the haze of anesthesia, a nurse gently informed her that the bone marrow collection had been successful, despite the unexpected complications. Relief washed over Celeste, though she could still feel the weakness in her own body. "We've done what we needed to, Celeste. Now we're going to take care of you," Dr. Luis assured her, his voice gentle as she drifted back into the fog of exhaustion. Her mission accomplished, though her future with Tiago remained uncertain. Disoriented and groggy, Celeste fought to stay conscious, her thoughts immediately turning to Tiago. "How is he?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper as she searched Dr. Luis's face for any sign of hope. His eyes reflected concern, but his tone remained professional. "He's stable for now, but he's still not out of danger," he said cautiously. "The operation was a success, but the next few hours are critical. We need to see how his body responds to the transplant." Celeste nodded, appreciating his honesty, but a knot tightened in her chest at the thought of Tiago fighting for his life while she lay helpless in a hospital bed. As the hours dragged on, Tiago's condition began to deteriorate rapidly. Dr. Luis appeared once more at her bedside, his expression grave. "Celeste, I'm afraid I have some difficult news," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "Tiago has slipped into a coma. We're doing everything we can, but the situation is very serious." The words hit Celeste like a physical blow, her world collapsing around her. The room seemed to close in on her, the silence becoming suffocating. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice trembling as she fought to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. With the doctor's permission, Celeste made her way to the ICU, her steps slow and heavy with dread. When she entered the room, the sight of Tiago lying there, so pale and still, connected to an array of machines, shattered the last of her composure. She sat beside his bed, taking his cold hand in hers, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Tiago, fight," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I need you. We still have so many plans." The hours passed in agonizing slowness as Celeste remained by Tiago's side, unwilling to leave. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was a cruel reminder of how fragile life was, each sound filling her with equal parts hope and fear. She spoke to him, telling stories of their time together, recounting their shared dreams, trying desperately to reach him in the darkness that had consumed him. In the early hours of the morning, Dr. Luis returned, his expression somber. "Celeste," he said quietly, his voice laced with compassion, "we need to prepare for any outcome. The next hour will be crucial in determining if he can recover." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but his words weighed heavily in the air, a stark reminder of how precarious the situation had become. Celeste nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was saying, but she couldn't bring herself to leave Tiago's side. She clung to his hand, whispering prayers for a miracle, refusing to let go of the hope that somehow he would pull through. The uncertainty gnawed at her, a torturous blend of dread and desperation as she awaited Tiago's fate. As she sat alone in the waiting room, the silence around her was deafening. The tension in the air was thick, made worse by the suspicious glances and hushed conversations of Tiago's family. They avoided her, their whispered words cutting off abruptly whenever she drew near. The coldness of their stares and the unspoken accusations weighed on her, deepening her sense of isolation. "They think I'm just an opportunist," Celeste thought bitterly, shrinking further into her chair as a lump formed in her throat. She had only wanted to help, yet here she was, feeling more alone than ever. The hospital's long, sterile corridors felt like a prison, each step she took echoing with the growing weight of her despair. Without Tiago's presence, without his comforting voice or reassuring touch, it felt as though every person she encountered saw her as an enemy, someone who didn't belong. One afternoon, as she stared out a rain-streaked window, lost in her thoughts, Dr. Luis approached her, his expression concerned. "Celeste," he began, his voice low and cautious, "I need to talk to you about something." He led her to a more private corner of the waiting area, away from the prying eyes of Tiago's family. "Rumors are going around," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "If Tiago doesn't make it, there's talk that his family might hold you responsible, legally. They're upset, and they believe that this donation was your way of securing a claim to his inheritance." Celeste's heart sank at his words, the weight of the accusation settling heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the judgment of those around her, the way their eyes lingered on her with suspicion and distrust. "But that's not true," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I just wanted to help him. I never cared about the money." Dr. Luis nodded, his expression sympathetic. I know, Celeste, but his family, they're grieving and they're looking for someone to blame. I just wanted you to be aware of the situation. Celeste felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. The pain of being misunderstood, of being judged by those who didn't know her heart, was overwhelming. She had come into Tiago's life with nothing but good intentions. But now, she was facing a battle she hadn't anticipated. The walls seemed to close in around her as she tried to find a way to navigate the storm that was now threatening to consume her. With a heavy heart, she returned to the ICU, where Tiago lay, still fighting for his life. She sat beside him, taking his hand once more, trying to find strength in the love they had shared. "Please, Tiago," she whispered, her voice filled with desperation. "Come back to me. I need you to wake up. I need you to tell them that this wasn't about the money. It was about you." But the only response was the steady beeping of the heart monitor, a cruel reminder that time was running out. Dr. Luis's words landed like a blow to Celeste's already fragile state. The notion that she might face legal repercussions for simply trying to save her friend had never crossed her mind. "I only did what was necessary, what we both agreed to," she murmured, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. Dr. Luis, sensing her turmoil, offered a comforting squeeze on her shoulder. "Families can get complicated in situations like this. They're looking for someone to blame," he said gently before walking away, leaving Celeste to wrestle with the mounting fear inside her. Now alone, Celeste felt desperation take hold. The idea that she could be held responsible for the worst-case scenario was terrifying. "What am I going to do now?" she whispered, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She knew she needed legal advice, someone to help her navigate this looming threat, but how could she afford it? The thought of Tiago's recovery consumed her, leaving little room to think about her safety. As she returned to his bedside, she clasped his hand tightly, her eyes fixed on his peaceful face. "Please, Tiago, wake up," she whispered through tears. "Don't leave me to face all of this alone." As night descended, so did Celeste's hope. The hospital room felt cold and unforgiving, and her faith in a miracle began to waver. In her darkest moments, she turned to prayer, whispering a desperate plea. "God, please save Tiago. He's a good man, a good friend. Give him the strength to come back to us." She clung to that prayer, to the hope that something greater would intervene. In the early hours of the morning, a subtle shift occurred. The once erratic beeps of the monitors became more rhythmic, the signs of life more promising. The nurse, vigilant by Tiago's side, quickly summoned Dr. Luis. He examined the readings and then turned to Celeste, his expression a blend of relief and cautious optimism. "Celeste, Tiago is showing signs of recovery," he said softly, allowing a small smile of hope to cross his face. A wave of immense relief washed over Celeste, bringing with it a surge of newfound strength. She returned to Tiago's side, her grip on his hand tightening as she whispered words of encouragement. "You're doing it, Tiago. Keep fighting. I'm here with you," she murmured, her voice brimming with faith and love. Throughout the day, Tiago's condition continued to improve. His eyelids flickered, and it seemed as though he was fighting to awaken from the long, drug-induced sleep. Celeste's hope grew with each small sign of progress, but just as she began to feel some semblance of peace, the calm was shattered by the sudden arrival of a family lawyer. He was a tall, imposing man with a severe expression, and his demeanor was as cold as the suit he wore. "I need to speak with you privately," the lawyer stated curtly, leading Celeste to a reserved room down the hall. Once they were alone, he handed her a document, his voice as icy as his expression. "The family is considering legal action against you," he announced without a hint of empathy. "They believe you unduly influenced Tiago into proceeding with the donation, which they claim has contributed to the deterioration of his condition." Celeste stared at the man in disbelief, her heart sinking as the gravity of the accusation hit her. "But that's not true," she protested, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "I never influenced Tiago. He made his own decisions. He wanted to do this." But the lawyer's face remained impassive, as if her words had no weight. "Intentions are often subject to interpretation," he replied coolly. "And when a large inheritance is involved, motives can become questionable." Disoriented by the threat of legal action and the growing distrust of Tiago's family, Celeste returned to his hospital room feeling more isolated than ever. The weight of suspicion was crushing, and she felt as though every eye in the hospital was judging her, questioning her motives. But then, as she looked down at Tiago's face, so pale yet still fighting, she knew she couldn't give in to despair. "I know the truth," she whispered to him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "And when you wake up, we'll make sure everyone knows it, too. I'm not leaving your side, Tiago. Not now, not ever." As the sun set and the shadows lengthened, Celeste remained by his bedside, her mind racing with worry. The possibility of facing a trial loomed large, a mountain she had no idea how to climb. Yet, even with the storm of uncertainty swirling around her, her priority remained unchanged, being there for Tiago, no matter what the future held. As night fell over the hospital, a gentle breeze of hope seemed to fill the air. Tiago's condition continued to improve, and against all odds, he began to emerge from his coma. His eyelids fluttered as he struggled to comprehend his surroundings, his mind foggy from the long sleep. Celeste, ever watchful at his side, gripped his hand tightly, her heart swelling with relief. Tears of joy glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "Tiago, you're waking up. Everything's going to be okay now." Her smile was a beacon of light amidst the darkness they had endured together. Tiago's gaze slowly focused on Celeste, recognition dawning as he took in her face. "Celeste, what happened? Did the surgery go well?" His voice, though weak, was a sweet melody to her ears, a sound she had feared she might never hear again. With a steadying breath, Celeste explained everything: the bone marrow donation, his near-fatal relapse, and the disturbing actions of his family. As she spoke, Tiago's expression darkened with growing anger. "This is ridiculous," he murmured, frustration evident in his tone. "You saved my life, Celeste. How dare they accuse you of anything? You did more for me than any of them ever have. You never wanted my money or inheritance. You refused it, remember? The real issue is their greed, not yours." Tiago's resolve strengthened as he pushed himself to sit up in bed, determination etched into his every movement. He motioned for a nurse to summon his family, including the lawyer who had leveled accusations against Celeste. Though Celeste tried to dissuade him, worried about his health, Tiago was unyielding. "No, Celeste, this needs to be dealt with now. It's time to set things straight." When his family arrived, they entered the room with a mixture of confusion and concern. Tiago, his voice growing stronger with each word, wasted no time addressing them. "I've heard about your intentions to sue Celeste," he began, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Let me be absolutely clear. I decided to receive the bone marrow donation from her. Celeste acted out of love, compassion, and friendship. If any of you try to pursue legal action against her, you will have to go through me first." The lawyer, trying to intervene, opened his mouth to speak, but Tiago silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Enough. There's nothing further to discuss. I will make sure that no accusations are brought against her." His words hung heavy in the room, the tension thick as the family absorbed his defiant stance. Gradually, the accusations and whispers began to die down. The family members exchanged uncomfortable glances but eventually backed off, realizing they had no choice but to accept Tiago's decision. The lawyer, still holding his stack of papers, retreated into the background, his presence no longer needed. With the tension easing, Celeste remained by Tiago's side, her hand still wrapped around his. Gratitude swelled within her as she realized just how much his support meant. Over the next few days, the two of them stayed close, spending time together in the hospital as Tiago continued to recover. Celeste, ever the caretaker, made sure her friend was well on the road to full recovery before they even considered leaving the hospital. Together, they began to plan for the future, for life beyond the walls of the hospital, and for what lay ahead. A few days later, Tiago was officially discharged, leaving his illness behind and stepping into the sunlight of a new chapter. As they made their way to the mansion, memories of the tumultuous days at the hospital filled the car. Tiago gazed out the window, the familiar view suddenly imbued with a deeper appreciation for life. Celeste, sitting beside him, watched him with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Her friend had fought through the worst of it, and though there was still treatment ahead, the danger had passed. "I'm so thankful that you stayed by my side through all of this, Celeste," Tiago said softly, breaking the peaceful silence that had settled between them. "I don't know how I would have survived without your strength and friendship." Celeste smiled warmly, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "We're in this together, Tiago. Whatever comes next, we'll face it head-on." As the mansion came into view, however, the weight of their reality began to settle in once again. Tiago could feel the tension building in his chest, knowing that the situation with his mother and the lawyer might have escalated during his absence. Celeste, sensing his anxiety, prepared herself to stand by his side, ready to face whatever awaited them. When they arrived at the mansion, they weren't greeted by warmth or celebration, but by the imposing presence of Pandora and the family lawyer, both seated in the grand living room. Pandora sat with a stern expression, her eyes cold and unyielding, while the lawyer clutched a thick stack of documents in his lap. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Celeste instinctively moved closer to Tiago, ready to support him no matter what lay ahead. Tiago straightened, his determination returning. "Mother," he began, his voice steady, "we need to talk. Tiago, we need to talk about some important things now that you're back," Pandora said, rising to greet her son. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge of urgency in her tone. Tiago exchanged a glance with Celeste, drawing in a deep breath before turning to face his mother. "Mom, I hope we can resolve any issues without further conflict. Celeste is my friend, and she's been essential to my recovery," he declared firmly, his voice leaving no room for doubt. Pandora sighed, a look of frustration flickering across her face before she glanced at the lawyer beside her. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Tiago, we understand your position, but it's important to consider the legal implications of your inheritance, especially given the circumstances. Your mother wants to ensure the family estate is protected, which is why she's requesting to draft a new will," the lawyer explained, his tone calculated, his concern focused on legalities rather than Tiago's well-being. A pang of frustration surged through Tiago, but he kept his composure. "I'm still alive," he said pointedly, "and according to the doctors, I'm recovering well. Any decision that excludes Celeste or questions her role in my life will not be accepted. I owe her my life, and I can't express enough gratitude for everything she's done for me. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be standing here right now." He squeezed Celeste's hand for emphasis, his voice unwavering in its conviction. Pandora's face tightened in response. She pursed her lips, clearly displeased by Tiago's stance. She stood and walked over to the large window, staring out at the property for a few moments as if the view might offer some kind of clarity. But when she turned back to face her son, her expression was as hardened as ever. "Tiago," she began, her voice carefully controlled, though tension simmered just beneath the surface. "You need to understand that these decisions regarding the inheritance are for your good and the future of our family. We can't be careless with what we've built." Tiago's expression darkened with disappointment. "Mom, it seems like you're more worried about money than about my health," he said, his voice tinged with hurt. "Celeste helped me when I was at my lowest, and all you can think about is protecting the estate. It's like you don't even care about what matters, me, your son. You just want to protect the money." Pandora turned sharply, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Tiago, I'm trying to protect you from being taken advantage of," she countered, her voice rising. "Do you think large sums of money don't attract opportunists? We can't ignore the reality that not everyone who appears kind is genuine. Don't forget where this woman came from." Celeste, who had been quietly listening, felt Pandora's words sting like a slap. She had never asked for anything from Tiago, never even hinted at wanting money or security. Yet here she was, being judged and labeled as an opportunist because of her past. Tiago's frustration boiled over. "Mother, Celeste has never asked for a single thing in return for helping me. When I offered her part of my inheritance, she refused it. How can you call her an opportunist? The only people interested in money seem to be you and the rest of the family," he snapped, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. Celeste, though deeply hurt, remained by Tiago's side, her silent support unwavering despite the accusations being thrown at her. Pandora, clearly displeased by Tiago's resistance, tightened her grip on the back of the chair she stood behind. "This isn't the right time for this discussion," Celeste interjected softly, her concern for Tiago's health evident in her tone. But Tiago, determined to stand his ground, ignored her plea and looked his mother squarely in the eyes. "Even now, Celeste is the only one thinking about my well-being," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of pain and resignation. "You came to the hospital not to see how I was doing, but to bring a lawyer. Celeste was by my side every single day, caring for me without expecting anything in return." Pandora trembled slightly as if the weight of Tiago's words were physically striking her. "You're being naive, Tiago," she retorted, her voice colder now. "Do you think people like Celeste don't have ulterior motives? Everyone has a price. You need to protect yourself from those who might see your vulnerability as an opportunity." The room fell into a heavy silence, filled with the unspoken pain that hung between mother and son. Tiago looked at Celeste, drawing strength from her quiet presence. "No matter what you believe, Mother, Celeste is my friend, and she will remain so for as long as I live. I won't let manipulation and greed define my life or our friendship," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "If you truly love me, as you claim, then let go of this obsession with the will, just as Celeste did." Pandora's face fell, the words hitting deeper than she expected. She stood there for a moment, staring at her son, the battle between love and control playing out in her eyes. The lawyer, sensing the fragility of the moment, took a step back, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, Pandora spoke, her voice softer but still laced with reluctance. "I only want what's best for you, Tiago," she said, her resolve weakening but not fully crumbling. "But if you're certain, if this is truly what you want, then I'll respect your decision." Tiago nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "I am certain. All I want is to live my life with the people who truly care about me. People like Celeste." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of everything that had been said, but it also carried with it the faintest hint of reconciliation. For now, the battle over the will was at a standstill, and Tiago could focus on his recovery, supported by the friendship and loyalty of Celeste, the one person who had stood by him through it all. Pandora's departure left a heavy silence in the room, her final words lingering ominously in the air. "You'll regret this, Tiago. You'll see that I'm right," she had said, her voice filled with a mix of bitterness and conviction. As the door closed behind her and the lawyer, Tiago, and Celeste exchanged a glance, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. They both knew that this wasn't the end of their challenges. Pandora's departure signaled the beginning of a new battle, but they also knew that they were in it together. In the weeks that followed, Tiago focused on his recovery, both physically and mentally. He reflected deeply on the recent events, his relationship with his family, and the values he wanted to uphold moving forward. With Celeste's unwavering support, he found the strength to make decisions that would shape the future of his family and his legacy. And so, he decided to confront the lingering issues head-on, organizing a family meeting to finalize his estate plans and to ensure clarity moving forward. The mansion's living room, typically a place of grandeur and warmth, now held a sense of tension as Tiago awaited the arrival of his relatives. Pandora was the last to enter, once again accompanied by the lawyer. Her expression remained inscrutable, a careful blend of caution and defiance, but it was clear that she was prepared for another confrontation. The other family members shifted nervously, fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Once everyone had gathered, Tiago began to speak, his voice steady and resolute. Thank you all for coming today. I've made some important decisions regarding my will and the future management of our estate, he said, his words commanding full attention. These decisions are based on what I've experienced recently and the lessons I've learned about who truly cares for me. He paused, his gaze shifting to Celeste, offering her a warm and reassuring smile. First and foremost, Tiago continued, I want to acknowledge that my recovery would not have been possible without Celeste. Her unconditional support saved my life, and for that, I've decided to include her in my will. This is not a reward, but a gesture of gratitude for everything she's done. The room buzzed with murmurs of surprise and discontent, but Tiago quickly raised his hand, silencing the crowd. I understand that this may come as a shock to some of you, he said, his tone firm but calm. But I want to make it clear that this decision is final. Pandora, clearly agitated, couldn't remain silent any longer. She stepped forward, her voice tight with frustration. Tiago, you need to reconsider. This isn't just about you. This is about the future of our family, the legacy your grandparents built. You're letting temporary emotions cloud your judgment, she argued, her eyes pleading for him to see her perspective. But Tiago remained unmoved. Mother, my judgment has never been clearer, he replied, his voice unwavering. Celeste has shown a loyalty that transcends anything I could have expected. She acted out of love and kindness, not greed. That's why I've also decided to establish a charity fund, ensuring that our wealth goes beyond just our family. This fund will help those who are less fortunate, particularly those struggling with the same illness I faced. Additionally, I've created another fund to help people like Celeste, those who have nothing to eat, nowhere to live, and no one to turn to. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. To my family, I've also allocated a modest sum in my will, including for you, Mother. But let me be clear, money is not the most important thing when it comes to family. What matters most are the actions we take and the love we share. The reactions in the room were mixed. Some family members nodded in silent approval, recognizing the wisdom in Tiago's words. Others, particularly Pandora, struggled to hide their discontent. She had hoped to maintain control over the entire estate, but Tiago's decisions had thwarted those plans. When the meeting finally concluded, the atmosphere remained thick with uncertainty, and the family members slowly dispersed, each lost in their thoughts. Celeste approached Tiago, her eyes glistening with emotion. You didn't have to do that, Tiago, she said softly, moved by his generosity and the recognition he had given her. I never wanted the money. Tiago smiled, taking her hand in his. I know, Celeste, but this was the right thing to do. And more than that, I believe that by using this wealth to help others, we're creating something far more meaningful than just an inheritance. Their eyes met, filled with a shared sense of purpose and hope. They knew that there were still challenges ahead, but they also knew that together, they could face anything. In the months that followed, Tiago and Celeste worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. The foundation they established became a beacon of hope for the needy, offering support and resources to those who had nowhere else to turn. It became a sanctuary for the forgotten, a place where the kindness and generosity that Tiago and Celeste had shown each other could be extended to others. Tiago's recovery continued steadily, and with each passing day, his bond with Celeste grew stronger. Together, they transformed not only their own lives but the lives of countless others, proving that true wealth lies in the impact we have on the world and the love we share with those around us. Tiago's journey of transformation reached new heights with the inauguration of a charitable hospital dedicated to providing free treatment for the disease that had once brought him to the brink of death. Fully recovered, he embraced life with a newfound vitality and purpose. Every day felt like a gift, a testament to his new vision of what truly mattered. It was no longer about the numbers in his bank account, but about the positive impact he could have on the world around him. During a fundraising event at the mansion, Tiago watched with a smile as children played in the garden, their laughter filling the air with hope. Seeing these children smile, knowing that we're making a difference, that's worth more than any amount of money, he said softly to Celeste. The joy in his heart is evident in his eyes. Celeste, too, had undergone a profound transformation. With Tiago's support, she seized the opportunity to study and grow, discovering a passion for managing the foundation's projects. She dove headfirst into her education, focusing on nonprofit management and social responsibility, skills that would equip her to lead the foundation effectively. Her natural empathy, combined with her newly acquired knowledge, made her a formidable force for good. She oversaw every aspect of the foundation's operations, ensuring that every dollar was used to maximize the positive impact on as many lives as possible. "I never imagined my life would take this direction," Tiago confessed one afternoon as they reviewed plans for a new wing of a local hospital the foundation was funding. He looked up from the blueprints, his eyes full of gratitude and wonder. "But I'm so happy it did. Helping others like this, giving back. It feels like the right path." Celeste smiled warmly, her own heart full of gratitude for the opportunities she had been given. "For me, studying was always a distant dream, something I never thought I'd have the chance to do. Growing up on the streets, I never imagined I'd be here, leading a foundation and making a difference in people's lives. But when the opportunity came, I grabbed it with everything I had. Knowing that my education could help others who've gone through the same struggles I did, it's a privilege. I feel like we're truly doing something good here, something meaningful." Her transformation from a street survivor to the leader of a prominent foundation was nothing short of remarkable. Tiago watched her with admiration as she led meetings, negotiated with partners, and deftly navigated the complex world of philanthropy. She had become a beacon of hope not just for those the foundation served, but for everyone who knew her story. "You're incredible, Celeste," Tiago said one day as they walked through the foundation's garden, which had been designed as a peaceful recovery space for those benefiting from the foundation's projects. "Seeing where you started and where you are now, it's beyond inspiring. And knowing that so much of it is because of your strength and determination, it's amazing." Celeste blushed at his praise but smiled, her eyes reflecting the same deep connection they had shared since the beginning of their journey. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tiago. You believed in me when no one else did. But more than that, you gave me the chance to believe in myself." As they continued walking, they both felt the weight of their past slowly lifting. Together, they had built something extraordinary, something that had the power to change lives. And though the road ahead was sure to be filled with new challenges, they were ready to face it, side by side, knowing that they had each other and a mission that was bigger than themselves. She laughed modestly, brushing off the praise with a warm smile. "I've had the best possible support, Tiago. I wouldn't have made it without you. This foundation, our work, it's living proof of what we can accomplish when we believe in people and give them the tools to transform their own lives," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. Together, they continued to lead the foundation, expanding its reach and deepening its impact. Their guiding principle remained the same: helping those in need and making a tangible difference in the world, one life at a time. Over the years, their relationship, tested by countless trials and triumphs, evolved into a partnership grounded in deep respect and friendship. They had faced dark moments together, and through it all, they had emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. Tiago often expressed his gratitude to Celeste, not just for saving him physically, but for inspiring the change that had reshaped his entire life. "You showed me what matters, Celeste," he said during a quiet walk through the mansion's beautifully renovated gardens. "I hope that, in some way, I've done the same for you." As time passed, the impact of their work began to ripple outward, touching more lives than they could have ever imagined. Stories of individuals and families whose lives had been transformed by the foundation began to spread, drawing even more support and recognition. Tiago, once known simply as a wealthy businessman, was now being celebrated as the millionaire with a heart, a man who had turned his fortune into a force for good. One sunny afternoon, as they prepared for another important meeting with the foundation's team, Tiago and Celeste found themselves on the mansion's terrace, taking a rare moment to reflect. The warm breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and the sun bathed the landscape in a golden glow. "To think that it all started with such a dark crisis," Tiago mused, his gaze drifting over the expansive view. And now, look at us, Celeste. Saving lives, changing destinies. Celeste smiled softly, her hand naturally finding him in a gesture of companionship and solidarity. It's true, Tiago. And to think it all began with a simple act of kindness, a decision to do what was right rather than what was easy. I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Their friendship was a living testament to the power of resilience and compassion. Even after the darkest of nights, the dawn always brought light. They had become a beacon of hope for countless others, proving that there is always an opportunity to make a difference, to bring light into the lives of those who need it most. And for Tiago and Celeste, this was only the beginning. Their work would continue, fueled by the deep bond they had forged, and by their shared belief that kindness, compassion, and a commitment to helping others could truly change the world. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. What have you learned so far? We encourage you to reflect on one valuable lesson and share it in the comments below. What is one thing you'll bring into practice in your life? We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that matters. See you in the next video.